While working on a 1964 single by Candy and the Kisses, this remarkable songwriting and producing duo first got together. Following the closure of their Excel and Gamble labels, the two established a third label, MOTOWN, where they assembled a stellar roster of artists, many of whom were kept on when MOTOWN was supplanted by Philadelphia International Records in 1971. Many of the best soul tracks of the decade came from this iconic label. Their sound served as a perfect transitional medium between disco and Motown records. The centerpiece of today's video is all about the legendary duo of Gamble and Huff. Now before we start, let's be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and push that notification bell to be sure you won't miss out on any more content. Now, without further ado, let's cue that intro. Growing up in Philadelphia, Kenny Gamble did a variety of things to help mold his adult life, including running a record store, helping the morning show DJs on WDAS, recording himself on several arcade machines, and singing with a group named the Romeos. In 1964, Gamble and Ross existed prior to Gamble and Huff. Jerry Ross found and managed Gamble when he was just 17 years old, and the two worked together for a long time. For the first time, Gamble collaborated with keyboardist Leon Huff on a recording for Candy and the Kisses. Ross then signed Gamble to Columbia Records in 1963 as a solo recording artist, releasing You Don't Know What You Got Until You Lose It.
Ring, the love we once shared.
Gamble, Ross, and Huff collaborated on the hit song I'm Gonna Make You Love Me, originally recorded by Jay and the Techniques, who were a Jerry Ross group and later covered by Dee Warwick and later by Diana Ross and the Supremes, and the Temptations. Following that, Ross signed Gamble as a solo artist with Columbia Records, and the song You Don't Know What You Got Until You Lose It was released in 1963. In 1967 as a writer, Expressway to Your Heart by the Soul Survivors became their first top 5 hit. The Intruders, they wrote and produced the top 10 hit song for their own Gamble Records label in the spring of 1968 called Cowboys to Girls. They went on to write and produce singles for Jerry Butler and Dee Warwick of Mercury Records, Wilson Pickett, Dusty Springfield, Archie Bell and the Drells, and the Sweet Inspirations, all of whom were signed to Atlantic Records. Now that they had established a strong track record, Gamble and Huff established Philadelphia International Records in 1971 to take against Berry Gordy and Motown. When they first approached Atlantic Records, the record label turned them down because the agreement was too costly. The project was supported and Philadelphia International's records were distributed by CBS Records, which was led at the time by Clive Davis, Don Bell, Bobby Martin, and Norman Harris. 3 in-house arrangers helped Philadelphia International produce some of the most well-known soul singles of the 1970s, including If You Don't Know Maine by Now by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes,
To upset our happy home.
Backstabbers,
A few of your buddies, they sure look shady. Blades of a long way.
but For the Love of Money,
Sisters and brothers, come on, start a love train.
and Love Train.
Talk about gas money, dollar bills, y'all. Come
By the OJs, as well as the Grammy-winning Me and Mrs. Jones by Billy Paul.
on, know she'll be there. Oh.
In a June 28, 2006 interview with BBC Radio 4, Gamble and Huff claimed that they met a woman in a cafe, they frequented, and that this encounter gave them the idea to compose me and Mrs. Jones after witnessing someone they knew who seemed to be having an affair. Gamble and Huff also founded Mighty 3 Music, a music publisher in partnership with Bell. Gamble and Huff's Philadelphia soul sound evolved from the simpler arrangements of the late 1960s into a style with sumptuous strings, thumping bass lines, and sliding hi-hat rhythms, elements that soon became the defining characteristics of a new musical genre called disco. By 1975, Motown and its sound had been largely superseded in popularity by Philadelphia International and the Philadelphia soul genre it helped establish, with Gamble and Huff emerging as the leading soul producers. When it came to popularity, Philadelphia International and the Philadelphia soul genre it helped create had mostly eclipsed Motown and its sound by 1975. Leading soul producers at the time were Huff and Gamble. The in-house studio band of Philadelphia International, which included MFSB, Mother, Father, Sister, Brother, contributed to almost all of the label's records. The Gamble and Huff combination wrote, produced, and orchestrated a number of successful instrumental albums and singles for MFSB, including the #1 smash song TSOP, The Sound of Philadelphia in 1974, which is now most remembered as the theme song for the American television program Soul Train.
The Soul Train.
In 1975, Philadelphia International became involved in a payola-related scandal, which is essentially a bribery scandal. Gamble was fine, but Huff was not. By the late 1970s, however, the popularity of the Philadelphia soul sound began to decline. Disco had suffered a backlash, R&B was going back toward the ballad, and rock had returned to the American charts. Still, the label had its share of late 1970s success. Among the later hits were Enjoy Yourself by the Jacksons in 1976,
Enjoy yourself with me. Enjoy yourself, enjoy yourself, enjoy yourself.
and Ain't No Stopping Us Now by McFadden and Whitehead in 1979.
Long, long way to go, and where we'll end up, I don't know.
One song they wrote called My Mood was adopted in 1980 as the close of WRC's Friday night 6 p.m. newscast. The label's survival was called into question when Teddy Pendergrass, a former Blue Note singer and Philadelphia International's biggest star, was paralyzed from the waist down in a vehicle accident in 1982. Philadelphia signed a new contract with EMI that year, severing its connections with CBS. By this point, the hits had dried up, but Gamble and Huff were still producing and writing songs for the label's musicians. Gamble and Huff were finally acknowledged in 1990 when Simply Red's rendition of the Blue Notes' 1972 smash song If You Don't Know Me By Now won a Grammy Award for Best R&B Song. In 1990, Warner Chappell Music also purchased Mighty 3 Music. Gamble and Huff received the Grammy Trustees Award in 1999, following in the footsteps of musical greats such as Walt Disney, the Beatles, and Frank Sinatra. With more than 3,000 songs written throughout their lifetime, they rank among the most prolific professional songwriters of all time. Throughout the 1970s, Gamble and Huff made music that addressed political and social issues faced by the African American community. Many of their songs articulated the theme of Black pride and highlighted the Black Power movement's struggle for power and self-determination. Representative examples include Billy Paul's Am I Black Enough for You, the OJ's Give the People What They Want, and the star-studded Let's Clean Up the Ghetto, the latter of which was the title track from an album that characterized Philadelphia International's broader political and social designs. Gamble's Clean Up the Ghetto project, which involves the youth of blighted communities to help clean up and repair damaged or neglected properties, started in Philadelphia and has spread to Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Chicago, with similar events being held throughout the country. Gamble has also contributed his time and energy to the T.J. Martell Foundation and the AMC Cancer Research Center and Hospital. He has served on the board of directors for the Philadelphia Music Foundation, which honors the artists, songwriters, and producers from Philadelphia. He founded the organization Universal Companies, which has opened a restaurant, a bookstore, a mosque, low-income housing, and several charter schools. These buildings, mostly built by locally hired labor, have served as springboards to revitalizing neighborhoods. For example, in 2003, Gamble and Universal Companies partnered with others for a $100 million plan to construct and renovate 400 homes in South Philadelphia. Today, Kenneth Gamble continues to write, often with Leon Huff, and Philadelphia International continues. He still lives in South Philadelphia and remains active in his community. Gamble owns the Shutter Royal Theater and surrounding properties. On September 19th, 2005, Gamble and Huff were inducted into the Dance Music Hall of Fame for their outstanding achievements as producers at a ceremony held in New York City. In 2008, Gamble and Huff were the first recipients of the newly created Ahmet Ertegun Award by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The award replaces the former non-performer inductee category. On May 20th, 2009, Gamble and Huff were named BM Icons at the 57th Annual BMI Pop Awards. Together, the duo has collected an astounding 86 BMI Pop and R&B awards. In May 2010, Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff were each awarded an honorary doctorate of music from Berklee College of Music. In 2024, Gamble and Huff were awarded Doctor of Music degrees honoris causa by the University of Pennsylvania. Leon Huff has a son, Leon Huff Jr., who produces for the record companies of today as well, working with notable artists such as 8 Ball and MJG, Beanie Siegel and State Property, Rough Riders, Lil Bow Wow, and more. Leon Huff Jr. goes by the stage name Pop Tracks, and he is the owner of the luxury HDE studios in the Fishtown neighborhood of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, before we go, I have a few questions for you all. What is your favorite song that's written or produced by Gamble and Huff? Also, what city do you think produced the best music? Detroit or Philly?